Hello, Brad Kramer with Provanio Consulting. We do safety and environmental consulting. And I wanted to give you a few resources here today to help you find what safety regulations might apply to your business. So the first one that most people think of when they think of safety regulations is, of course, OSHA. All right, so there's several different standards for OSHA. You can either buy the book here, but it changes quite frequently. So, this is a 2016 book, and there's already a lot of things that have changed in those 4 years since then. So you can also get them online, right? And that's free. I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll go to screen. All right, so looking at the different standards here, we have 1910. 1910 is going to be your general industry. So that's what typically what factories, retail, office space, all that is under the 1910 standards. There are other industries that OSHA regulates, and they do have their own standard. For example, 1926. This is for the construction industry. So when you have construction going on, they're not going to be falling under the 1910 standard and have a totally different set of regulations that apply to them. There is a lot of overlap, a lot of the same rules apply, but there are enough differences that if you're trying to, let's say you only knew 1910 and you were having construction done on your, say in your facility somewhere, and you didn't know anything about 1926, you might aggravate your contractors if you're trying to make them follow your standards that you're under for general industry, right? And also, for example, here's 1915. This is for maritime shipyards, which we don't have any shipyards around southern Minnesota where I'm from, and I know absolutely nothing about this standard. So all your safety experts are going to have different areas of expertise, right? Typically, not everybody's going to know all the different standards. So there's also a lot of times I'll be, covering topics and somebody says, well, where is this in OSHA? Because let's say, for example, if we're talking about emergency exit lighting, the exit signs and the floodlights that are on your emergency exits, or if we're talking about fire extinguisher inspections, a lot of times those aren't covered in your OSHA standards, right? So those a lot of times are going to be covered in your NFPA standards. So we'll go back to sharing my screen here, and these are right here. All right, so if we go to nfpa.org and we look at the codes and standards, here's a list of them right here. And what these are, NFPA standards, they aren't law, right? These are basically consensus standards, and they're not law until a regulatory agency or let's say your city council or state government enacts one of these codes or as a building code, for example. All right. So a lot of these do now have the force of law behind them because they've been picked up as a building code, but not all of them do. So if we look at, for example, fire extinguishers, so if we get to look at NFPA 10, that tells us what we have to have inspected for fire extinguishers. If we wanted to go to 100, that's going to have a lot of the information on building code. And as we get into here, or excuse me, 101, and then as we get into like, say, 101B, they're going to talk about means of egress. And that's where you're going to find your stuff. For example, the requirements that exit lights and stuff like that be checked monthly, right? A lot of businesses don't check those. They're battery operated, so that battery is going to die out on you eventually. And when the power goes out, you're not going to have any light. So that's where some of these rules are, and because they've been picked up as building code, they do have the force of law behind them. Now, a lot of these don't have the force of law; they're basically best practices, but that does have some impact on businesses that should be following them anyway. So anyway, you can get these standards. I mean, if you were to purchase, say, the binder, you'd have to pay money for it, but you can just, let's say I want to just look it up here, find out what's in there. I can get free access to it. I'm going to hit free access. I'm going to look at the 2018 English edition. Usually you can look up older Spanish editions and stuff like that. View, and I have an account, so you have to create an account to see them. That account's free to create, and I have to agree to their limitations. And now I can look up the building codes here through under the NFPA 101 code, right? So I can look everything up. I'm not able to print this. I'm not able to save it or anything like that. So easy way to look up what's in that code, but you're not going to be able to like print it out and stuff like that, right? Next we have ANSI. So ANSI again is kind of consensus standards. They're typically going to have an area of expertise or an area, focus area that they're getting consensus standards developed on. For example, PPE a lot of times falls under this. Fall protection, safety glasses, and all that. Unless you're manufacturing those products, a lot of times the ANSI standards aren't going to apply a whole lot to you, but they can in some instances where, and again, you'd have to purchase them to actually find out what's in there. Now, in very few situations have I actually had to go back and refer to the ANSI standard. I think fall protection is one instance that I actually go back and refer to the actual ANSI standard. Another place that you're going to find different regulations is your, you might have your, if you're in a state-run OSHA state, about half the states are state and half the states are federal, roughly. So if you have a state OSHA, in my case, it's Minnesota, so we have MinOSHA. There are a few different regulations. OSHA enforces, or MinOSHA enforces just about everything that federal OSHA has, and a few more, all right? So unless you keep up to date on things or have somebody that's gone through a little additional training, they're not necessarily going to know what's in that state standard. So for example, in Minnesota, I'm going to share my screen again here. In Minnesota, we have MinOSHA. So here's a standard that if somebody came from another state and didn't know our rules or hadn't had additional training, they wouldn't know that if you have forklifts that have internal combustion engines or anything that's inside your facility with internal combustion engines, they have to be tested for carbon monoxide. All right, so here's, for example, is the MinOSHA rule on that. And also there's other equipment that you might have in your facility that falls under even other jurisdictions. So here we have Minnesota Department of Health. So if you have any, say, x-ray equipment, so if you have a manufacturing plant, say food manufacturing, and your food goes through an x-ray to make sure it doesn't have any metal shavings in it, that x-ray equipment now requires a radiation safety program, and you should have a radiation safety officer, which I am certified as a radiation safety officer in Minnesota. So there's some additional administrative rules that you have to follow there. Good way to find information that you might be looking for. If you're not sure, if you're just looking for maybe clarification or want to ask a quick question, is social media. Seek out those, this is a page that I actually started. I'm an administrator of Safety Pro Network. And last I checked, it's probably about 600 or 700 members of this group already. So people can post questions. We have interesting discussions. I try and stay away from some of the things that are more controversial or political. Keep that off the page just so that we can learn as safety professionals. But if you ever wanted to come online here and just ask a question of a safety professional or reach out to a consultant like myself, a lot of times we'll answer those questions for free for you. All right, so just wanted to throw some of those out there. For example, a lot of people that if they're not safety professionals, is like that's the focus of their career. Let's say they're HR managers or something like that, trying to run a safety program. A lot of times they have no idea that, say, NFPA and some of those ANSI standards and stuff like that apply to them. So I just want to throw that out there as an additional resource to help you find what you're looking for. So, all right, well, thank you very much and have a safe day. Bye.